Hi everyone, it's Carissa. Today I wanted to show you a technique that I'm using in my upcoming blanket pattern. This is called the Wonky Blocks Blanket. And for my crochet friends, don't worry, there will be a crochet version of this pattern as well. So in the knit version, this is worked in columns, changing colors for each block as you go. And then we use a join as you go technique for the next column. You'll work one stitch together with the selvage edge of the previous column. So it's joined as you go. You won't have to do any seaming to get this blanket together in the end. It will all be one piece already. So let's take a look at how to do this. First, I'm going to flip my blanket over to the wrong side, and we're going to look at the cast on edge of the previous column that I just finished. So here's my cast on tail, and this selvage edge along the right hand side is where we're going to be joining our next column. But first, I have to cast on for my next column. So let me grab my yarn and my needles, and I'm going to cast on 20 stitches with the long tail method, just as the pattern indicates. So now I have all of my cast on stitches here, and I'm going to turn my work to work my first wrong side row. I want my yarn to be in front, get the tail out of the way. And for my first wrong side row, I'm going to slip the first stitch purlwise with the yarn in front. So I'm not going to purl it or knit it. I'm just going to insert my right hand needle as if to purl, but just slip it off the left needle instead. And I'm going to bring my yarn to the back between the tips of my needles, so I'm ready to knit the next stitch. And I'm going to knit all the way across this row to the last stitch. I'm not going to knit the last stitch, I'm just going to knit to it. So now I have knit to the last stitch. I have one more stitch here on my left hand needle. I'm not going to knit it. I am simply going to slip it as if to knit with the yarn still at the back of my work. So I'll insert my needle as if to knit, but I'm just going to slip it off my left needle instead. Now comes the fun part where we start joining to our blanket in progress here. So I'm going to grab the cast on edge of my last column here, and let me pick it up closer for you. So here's where my cast on tail is attached, and we're looking for that first selvage stitch after the cast on tail. If you turn it up on end, you should be able to see the V's of those stitches along the edge. So we're looking for the very first V. And I'm going to get my yarn out of the way. I'm going to insert my right hand needle under both legs of that first selvage stitch, and I'm going to wrap my yarn around and knit that selvage stitch. Pull up that loop. Now I'm going to grab my other knitting needle, and with my left hand needle I'm going to grab that slip stitch, the one that was the last stitch of our row before we picked up and knitted a stitch. I'm going to use my left hand needle to slip that, or to pass that slip stitch up and over and off the needle. So I've essentially just worked a slip slip knit or a slip knit pass over using the last stitch from my previous row and the picked up stitch from my selvage stitch of my previous column. So now my next column is officially joined to my blanket in progress. Now when I turn my work here, I want to take note of which direction I turn my work. This is going to be important later. So I'm going to turn counterclockwise to work my next right side row. And this is going to be a little tedious at first because we've got this big blanket in progress hanging off of one little stitch on our needle. So it's going to be a little tedious. I would definitely recommend that you work on a tabletop or maybe on your lap, something to hold the weight of this blanket so that it's not pulling on that one stitch on your needles. Now we're going to work a right side row, which also begins with a slip one purlwise with yarn in front. Bring the yarn back to the back of my work and knit all the way to the end this time. We don't have to do anything with that last stitch on this row. Now I have finished my right side row. I'm going to turn my work to work back again. But like I said, the previous turn, I wanted to take note of which direction I turned my work because I want to alternate directions. If I keep turning my work the same direction after each row, this blanket is going to get twisted up and it's going to be really painful. So if you alternate which direction you turn after each row, that will not be an issue. So I turned counterclockwise before. This time I'm going to turn clockwise. And I want my yarn to be in the front to start my next wrong side row with a slip stitch purlwise with yarn in front. Yarn back to the back between the needle tips, and then I'll knit to the last stitch. Again, I don't want to knit that last stitch, I just want to knit to it. And you know what? Let's look at what this looks like if you hold your yarn in the right hand. So if you are an English style knitter, or a thrower, if you will. So I'm going to finish knitting to the last stitch of this wrong side row. There's my last stitch still on my left needle. I'm going to slip that as if to knit with the yarn still at the back of my work. And now I want to look for the next selvage stitch in line. So I've already joined to this stitch. Here's the next stitch in line. I'm going to insert my right needle under both legs of that stitch and knit it. And then I'm going to use my left needle to pass the slip stitch over that picked up stitch. And now I've finished my next wrong side row. I've joined a second stitch to my previous column here. If you have a little trouble picking up and knitting from the selvage edge, I have a little trick to show you. So first I'm going to turn to work my next right side row. Last time I turned clockwise, so I want to turn counterclockwise this time. What you can do to remember that is each time you join, turn counterclockwise. And when you're at the other end and you're not joining, turn clockwise. So we're turning counterclockwise this time for our next right side row. And if you have trouble picking up and knitting those selvage stitches, what you can do is pick it up at the beginning of a right side row where I am now, and then just leave it on your needle and it'll be ready and waiting for you when you come back to it. So I've just joined to this stitch here. So this stitch is my next in line. I'm just going to insert my right hand needle there from right to left, and then I'm going to pretend like it's not even there, and it'll be waiting for me when I need it. So now I'll work my right side row, slip purlwise with yarn in front, bring the yarn to the back between the needle tips, and knit to the end of this row. Now there's the end of my right side row. So I did not do a join here. So I want to turn this clockwise this time. And then I'll have to bring my yarn to the front again to be ready for my slip with yarn in front. So I will slip that stitch purlwise with the yarn in front, bring the yarn to the back to be ready to knit the next stitch, and I'm going to knit all the way to the last stitch on this row. Now I've knitted to the last stitch, so this is my last pink stitch that I'm actually working on. This is the selvage stitch that I picked up preemptively. It's not really a stitch yet. So I've knitted to the last stitch. I'm going to slip as if to knit. Then I'm going to knit that selvage stitch that I've already picked up. And then I'll use my left hand needle to pass the slip stitch up and over. And that was a little bit easier, I think, to get that pick up and knit when it's already on your needle. So we'll just continue like that, joining each row to the next selvage stitch in line. And you can see from my previous column here, this is the nice seam that it makes when you join in this way, when you join as you go. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.